Welcome back to Music and Wood. Today we're going to work on the bass guitar with that crazy bent neck, and we're going to try to straighten it out and get it to be pretty playable. So the past few videos we've done a few projects getting ready for this. Of course, we've got our neck rest cradle, which you can watch the previous video on how to make. And we also have the washers that we created in the very first video that we're going to use to shim up the truss rod nut. We might also do a nut replacement. Got the Tusk XL, and if we can get this neck straight, we'll go ahead and put this nut on as well, because that nut is pretty shot. All right, first step here, we're gonna check how bad this looks, and we're gonna use our straight edge here. I don't have a actual dedicated fretboard straight edge for a bass, so this will do. Wow, that is almost 1/8 of an inch relief in that neck. That is no good for sure. Let's go ahead and take the neck off the body and see what we can do here to shim up that truss rod nut to straighten the neck out. All right, we now have the neck detached from the bass guitar. So we can take a look at that, and that is definitely pretty bowed. Let's see if we can get that in the shot, but that is definitely very bowed forward here. Now I'm going to take the truss rod nut completely out. Sometimes a little bit of wax might help get the nut out if it's a tight fit in there, but let's see. Once the nut stops coming out and it feels really easy to turn, you can probably take your Allen wrench and wiggle it out. There we go. We've got the truss rod nut out of the neck now. So we can put the washers in on the truss rod to shim that up. Might be a tight fit and hard to get them in, so I'm going to use a very thin Allen wrench here to try to push them down over the truss rod. I've got a few washers now in the truss rod. We're going to put the truss rod nut back in, clamp the neck to try and straighten it out, and we'll see what we can get. Now that we have the truss rod nut tightened down to just where you can feel some pressure, I'm going to go ahead and clamp the neck up to try and straighten it out. What I'm going to do is support both sides on a soft surface here, and then clamp down the center to try and bring that forward a little bit. And I think that might help us straighten the neck out. So we're going to take this clamp and put it on the back of the neck, where we're going to apply pressure, trying to help straighten out that neck, so that we can then tighten down the truss rod to hold the shape of the neck straight. We can't rely on the truss rod to really bend that whole piece of wood, so we're going to help it out and then just use the truss rod to hopefully keep it into a nice straight shape. We now have the neck clamped down in a pretty heavy back bow. So let's go ahead and tighten down the truss rod nut now. We've tightened the truss rod nut pretty heavily, but we're not really going to strip it out because we're not running out of thread. We've got those washers in place there, which are helping it from bottom out and stripping of threads, which would be bad. So now let's go ahead and take it off the clamp jig here and check the straightness as it sits without any tension, and then go ahead and put it back onto the bass body. That's not too bad. There's just ever so slightly a back bow to the neck. I might even clamp it down and get a little bit more out of the truss rod nut. Let's go ahead and do that. All right, we got another quarter-ish of a turn out of that. Let's go ahead and then take it back off the clamp and check straightness again. Excellent. We've definitely got a back bow going on the neck now. That's going to help when the tension is up here on the neck and on the head and everything, because it's really going to pull the neck forward pretty heavily. So I believe where we've got it set with the back bow here with no tension, once we string it up and put it under tension, it should go pretty straight. Since I have high hopes, while I'm in here, let's just go ahead and replace this nut real fast. To replace the nut, I'm going to use a punch and a sharp blade. Sharp blade is to gently score any glue that may have glued the nut to the wood, and then the punch is to punch it right out of its slot. Then we'll replace it with this tusk, which we'll probably have to sand down a little bit to get shaped properly. Nut removed. Here's our new nut. Let's check the shape from the old to the new. Make sure that they are pretty close. Here's the old nut. You can see all the graphite used there to try to keep it lubricated, but also those holes are pretty crazy gouged and looking very weird. And here's the new nut. We can see there's a lot more material in the grooves for the strings. The tusk is just slightly wider and also has a somewhat more radiused bottom to it. So I think what we'll do is see just how much we need to remove to get this to sit nicely. Not much at all. I'll just rub this nut up against the belt sander here, but I won't turn it on because that'll remove far too much material far too quickly. We'll go ahead and check the fit. And there's more material to remove. That's now a great fit. Let's go ahead and flatten the bottom radius out a bit here. Profile now pretty well matches the old nut. Let's go ahead and just put a couple of drops of super glue. You don't want to go crazy, because if you need to ever remove your nut and replace it again, you want to be able to knock it out with the same ease that we had knocking out the first nut. So I'm going to go get a little super glue, drop a couple of drops in there, and then we'll glue this in. We'll hold that in place for a few seconds while the glue sets. While we've got the strings off, let's go ahead and condition the fretboard too. Now we've got a straightened out neck, a fresh nut, and a nicely conditioned fretboard. Let's go ahead and put it back onto the body of the guitar. Then we'll test it out. So far so good. Neck is seeming to hold pretty straight here. Let's get a tuner and put full pressure on the neck. We're now in tune. Doesn't seem too bad. Let's check with our straight edge on the neck now. Perfect. There's just a little bit of relief in the neck, and that's just how we need it to be, with just a small amount of relief. Before, it was just outrageous. Now, let's go ahead, check the intonation and the action height, and we'll finish the setup on this. All right, we've got the action and the radius of the strings set nicely. Let's check the intonation now. Perfect on the low E. Perfect on the A. Perfect on the D. And perfect on the G. That never happens. This guitar is in perfect intonation. The neck looks great comparatively to what it was before. The action height is much better, making it a playable bass guitar again. Let's plug it into a small little practice amp and jam for a second. Thanks for joining us today on Music and Wood in repairing this bass guitar neck. Now hopefully you'll know how to repair your bass guitar neck as well, or guitar neck. It doesn't really matter either way. This technique should work in both cases. All we did was add some more tension to the neck to help keep it straight. It's unfortunate that it collapsed, but I'm really happy we were able to repair it. It was my first bass guitar and really enjoy it. It's a Squier P bass, in case you were wondering, the 20th anniversary model, and it was also made in Indonesia, not China. Not the most amazing guitar or most expensive guitar, but definitely a sentimental value to me. So real happy we were able to get the new nut and the neck taken care of. Come back and join us next time on Music and Wood for more fun projects. Peace.